The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work. For more information, call us or visit our website.
And I'd like to welcome you all to the March meeting of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. Sorry we missed the February meeting because of inclement weather, but we're going to proceed with the plans that we had scheduled for the February meeting. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, April 9th. The presentation topic for that meeting will be the development of a comprehensive mercury strategy for the Oak Ridge Reservation. Now we're going to take some comments. Mr. Whitney.
Yes. Okay. Good evening, everybody. How are you? It's a pleasure to be here tonight. It's been a while since I've been here, so I do apologize for that. Sue Cange usually attends. I definitely wanted to come tonight. I think it's an important night for our program, and I think it's important presentation you'll hear from Tammy Blaine tonight as well. You know, I'm not going to take a lot of time, but, you know, we are, I think, at a very important time in the program, the EM program at Oak Ridge going forward. We have done a lot of work at ETTP, and as you know, really reached some historic achievements over the past few months. In December, finishing the demolition of the K-25 building, and then just yesterday, very historic for us and somewhat sentimental, as our federal project director, Jim Kapotic, was in the cab of the last truck hauling debris from the site, from the K-25 site. So very important. We're continuing to, push forward and hopefully accelerating our work out there at ETTP. ECOR is doing an outstanding job, and we really have done very good work out there. Now, as we kind of have that in our sights, and I think that is one of our portfolios, ETTP, that's actually, when we talk about a vision, we're talking about a near-term vision of completing that work out there. It's an important time as we transition and start to look at continue to look at other areas, issues that we need to address and commitments that we've made. And associated with those are some pretty significant capital projects coming online that we're going to continue to look towards, but they're going to present challenges, and that includes Outfall 200 Mercury Treatment Facility, of course, the sludge build-out facility, a new disposal cell, so we can continue and finish our cleanup work here on the reservation. But all of these things, as we go forward, are not going to be without their challenges, whether they're technical, project-related, or whatnot. Budget is going to be one of those challenges. So I think tonight is a very good opportunity for us to discuss our FY16 formulation process, some of the priorities that we have, and of course take your input and your thoughts and considerations on the matter as we go forward. So like I said, I'm very happy to be here, and I appreciate the work that you all do to put in on a daily basis to the EM program, the activity that you all do, and appreciate your time and support of this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitney, and we're glad to see you here tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Adler?
Yes, I've got just a couple things. Actually, 2 administrative things and 3 interesting things.
Proceed.
On the administrative front, as you're aware, we're in the midst of planning for the annual board retreat, and a poll went out a while ago where the group elected to hold the retreat locally rather than at a distant location, or I should say the poll favored holding it locally rather than at a remote location as we've done in the past. At the last executive board meeting, we decided to go out with one more poll, and I promise this is the last one, to refine the local board retreat concept a little bit. Basically, the 2 ideas that are out there, one is to hold it on a Saturday as we have in the past at some local facility. An alternate would be to simply dedicate the August meeting, night time here, to the board retreat. Now that would have to be a very focused effort, because we've typically allowed ourselves about 4 hours for the retreat, and if we're going to do it as part of a nighttime thing, I don't want to try and get people to come here at night for 4 hours to do that. So Pete Osborne will issue an email to everyone with a more thorough characterization of the 2 ideas, and if people could just point at the one they like the most, we'll lock in a final plan and get it done. Second, administrative issue. We've been directed by headquarters to be very clear about the role that the board can and can't play in the management of DOE money. And the basic message is DOE has to manage DOE's money. So we are going to, and that's basically what we've been doing anyway, but we're going to modestly restructure one of the board's subcommittees. It's currently called, I think, Board Process and Finance Committee, and that gave the impression that the board was actually in the finance business. We're going to change the name. We're going to probably meet less and spend less time going over money. We still will be looking for the board's thoughts and recommendations on how to spend the monies made available to the board. It's more of a perception thing than a big shift. Okay, now the interesting things. Some of you probably I saw in the Knoxville News Sentinel that they have found during excavation activities for the uranium processing facility that's to be built at Y12, they dug into some demolition debris that was contaminated with depleted uranium. So I want to give a little bit of background on that. Basically, they are building a haul road that will service the UPF construction activity. And as part of that activity, they made a fairly deep cut into the side of the ridge. And at the base of that cut, they discovered demolition debris, concrete rubble, a stump, just odds and ends. It looks like what would be left over if you tore a building down and brought it into a low-lying area and covered it with dirt, which is probably exactly what happened perhaps 40, 50, 60 years ago. Measurements taken of the debris indicate that it is contaminated with depleted uranium. It's measurable. It's at levels that preclude us from taking it to just any landfill, but it's not at levels that present a health risk. It's what we would call low-level waste. So we are looking at options for removing and dispositioning the material. We haven't completed that yet. It's a relatively limited volume of it. It hasn't, for now, disrupted the excavation, the progressing of work for UPF, and what we want to avoid is for it to do that. So we're going to look into what options exist for managing it and disposing of it. That's about the story on that. I just want to make sure you'd heard about it since it has gotten people's interest. Second issue concerns the ongoing demolition effort at ETTP. As Mark just mentioned, we actually finished hauling the last load, I think Mark mentioned it, the last load of waste, truckload of waste. I wasn't listening very closely, obviously, to the boss. The last load of waste from the site. But we also have encountered, and this wasn't entirely unexpected, residual levels of contaminants in the groundwater beneath the site and in some of the various conveyances that leave the site. So I want to give you some information on that also. At the beginning, when we designed this cleanup effort, this building demolition effort, we came to agreements with the state and EPA on how to do the demolition and how to control the inevitable residual, what we would call fugitive releases that occur as you tear a building down. So we set permissible levels for releases. And we started tearing the building down and also have engaged in monitoring activities actually in 3 different subsurface conveyances. One is the stormwater pipes that leave the site that collect water from parking lots and rooftops and such and convey it out to the local creek. Another is some duct work that is underground that carries electrical conduits around the site. And then the third are what we call sanitary sewers. And that's basically sewage, things that carry gray water from showers and restrooms and such to a water treatment plant. We have found and again, this isn't a big surprise, but we have found measurable, as we've done the job, and as we've moved into the last bit of the job, remember where we're tearing down what we call the technetium area of the building, the last few units, the last bit of the east wing, we've started to see some levels of technetium in each of those 3 pipelines, if you will. The levels that we've detected are, again, do not present a health threat. They're below the levels that DOE uses to allow for discharge. And we're continuing to monitor and take any reasonable measures we think need to be taken to ensure that we knock levels down as low as reasonably achievable. We actually, in DOE's radiation safety programs, are required under our own orders to, first of all, meet limits that are set, but then when we've met that limit but we can still detect radioactive material, we're required to implement a policy called ALARA, which stands for as low as reasonably achievable. So we're below limits, but we're looking at ways of driving it down further. So what we've done in the case of the stormwater and the sanitary lines and the electrical conduits is to basically close off, block off, and isolate the lines. So that prevents continued additional transfer of material through those lines to wherever those lines go. In the case of the sanitary sewer line, which goes to first to a satellite sewage treatment facility across the river from ETTP, and then that facility ultimately feeds into the Big Turtle facility on the west end of Oak Ridge. We went over and sampled the sludge in that facility. That's a facility owned by the city, and we were able to detect technetium there also. So as a prudent, proactive measure, we're going and retrieving that sludge, about 5,000 gallons of it, bringing it back to the site, and we'll decide what to do with it, but we'll disposition it after we've coordinated with the state and EPA on how to disposition it. None of these actions are being taken because we are forced to do them. They're all being taken because we believe it's the right thing to do. As best we can tell, we're certain there are no health risks. We believe we're compliant with all the things we've agreed to. And that's the technetium story. I wanted you to hear it from us because often when any level of anything leaves the site, it becomes misunderstood, and there's a lot of heat and not much light in the coverage of the issue. So that's the deal with the technetium. The third item concerns the slab, the K25 slab, which is now completely exposed because all the building's gone. And the issue is historic preservation. You may recall that we committed to try to preserve the slab for future generations as a means of illustrating the magnitude of the K25 building. That still remains our plan. As we cleaned up the tech area, some areas of the slab, of course, became contaminated with technetium. As we completed the cleanup, we triggered an obligation to do a study on just how much of the slab can be preserved and how. So within 90 days, I think we're supposed to initiate that study. We'll be doing that. We'll be doing that based on the newly available understanding of the slab's chemical and radiological conditions. And based on the results of that study, we'll decide how much the slab could be left in place without any modification. There may be areas of the slab that need to be pulled up because they suffer from some contamination, perhaps some areas that need to be epoxied to fix things in place. We'll sort through all that. But the news is the building's gone. We've got a 90-day clock now to start the study. The study will be done. It still remains our hope to preserve the slab. So that's the slab story. Does anybody have any questions on any of those three things? I went through them pretty quickly.
If the slab is completely uncovered, okay, is there any possibility of water runoff or anything like that would pick up the
Sure.
Tech 99? And
Sure there is.
Okay.
Sure there is. When we design a D&D job, we employ all reasonable measures. First of all, we design it in coordination with our regulatory counterparts, and we implement all reasonable measures to control these what you call fugitive releases. If you tear a building down, there's going to be some airborne, there's going to be some water. It all occurs during rainstorms and so forth. So we, in this case, have set up berms to control runoff. We collect the water on the inside of the berms. We mist so as to minimize any generation of dust, but of course misting produces water, so you have to manage the water. We have lots of monitoring locations. And then in the case of this job, as we got into it, we identified some additional measures that seemed prudent, such as sealing off. We actually did a lot to seal off pipes that connected the building to these lateral sewer, stormwater, and electrical conduits. We did a lot of that ahead of time. But as we got into the job, we realized that additional measures were reasonable. So that's what I discussed a little bit before. We probably, based on this job at K25, will learn some lessons that may allow us to do even better when we tear down future buildings. That's one of the things we're going to look at. But there is no way, short of doing the job in a bubble with a bubble underneath the building, which is physically impossible, there is no way that you can avoid any release. So the trick is to understand what level of release is acceptable, come to agreement on that, and then take all reasonable measures to hit that level and knock it down if you can. So, yeah, Jimmy?
The analytical people have gotten so good that I wonder if there is a level, say for technetium, that we can detect by the technologists and know that it's not a problem.
Yeah, that's where we're at. We're definitely detecting technetium. There's no question. It's not an artifact of the laboratory. It's a measured presence, true positive detection of technetium. But we can detect at extremely low levels. We measure in the picocurie range. We've measured up to 100,000 plus picocuries per gram, but a pico is a real small unit. I think it's 1 in a billion or 1 in a trillion curies. So yes, you can measure at levels well below the levels that are levels of concern, but again, the department's policy required by DOE orders is to drive things down as low as can be reasonably achieved. So if there are cost-effective things that are done, yeah, it is the order we live by. So, any other questions?
Thank you, David.
Sure.
Do you want to say anything about the change of the management team?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I do.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
Yeah.
I know we put a lot on your plate today.
Yeah, I usually don't talk this much. Kate Alexander has retired. Said goodbye to her last month, and a new person, David Borak, right?
Yes.
Has taken her place on an acting basis. I know David a little bit. Seems like a great person to work with. Who knows if it will be David a few months from now? Again, he's in an acting basis. I think they are holding a competition for the position. I don't know if David's competing for it or not, but there is a change in the person. I don't think we'll see a significant change in the process or stance the headquarters takes. So.
And Mr. Huizenga has also
Yeah.
stepped away.
That too.
Yes.
That's what you meant.
So we have
would you like to say
lost
anything
our
about-
Washington leadership.
Sure, I'll
Yeah.
address it just for a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Whitney.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. I apologize. And I just got off the phone with Dave Huizenga, and the secretary did announce either earlier this week or late last week that the president intends to nominate Monica Regalbuto to the position of Assistant Secretary for Environmental Management. Monica has very impressive credentials. I worked with her at headquarters before I moved here. Very technically competent, savvy person, a very good manager, and I think will be in good hands. At the same time, we'll, of course, miss Dave Huizenga because he's, I think, done a fabulous job from the culture of the organization to really focusing on the right things. And really letting us do our work and supporting us in the things that we feel are the priorities for our site. Dave, as a secretary, outlined in his email, will stay on for some time. We're not exactly sure how long that time will be to help the department through the budget rollout process for the FY15. As you probably saw, the FY15 top line numbers came out last week. and more details will come out probably within the next several days. So Dave will stay on for a little bit and to help with that process. And Jim Owendoff right now, if you know him, he's the acting deputy, took Tracy Mustin's position when she retired in January. And Jack Craig, who is from the EM Consolidated Business Center, the director of that office, EM side office, is the acting EM3, so EM 1, 2, and 3 are actually all acting right now because Dave's been in acting capacity for a couple of years now. And Jack and Jim knows the program. Jim's been around forever, and he's a great supporter of Oak Ridge and the work we're doing here. And so it's very good to have him in that capacity. And Jack's a great guy too, and understands the mission. So we're looking forward to working with Monica. Hopefully, she'll be confirmed at some point. Our undersecretary. For the Office of Management Performance, Ms. Robinson was nominated last year, is still awaiting confirmation. So I think we're still trying to work through that that backlog.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Whitney.
Sir.
Now it's time to hear from the Environmental Protection Agency and the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. Ms. Jones, it's wonderful to see you here again. It's been a long time. Glad you were able to make the trip. Thank you for doing so.
Thank you. It has been a while. I just want to elaborate, if I could, on the success of the K-25 project. It's been a long one, and I'm glad that that's come to an end. And I believe that we have already started sampling at K-27, so you'll see some significant activity going on in the future at ETTP. But if I may, Jeff Crane is here, the EPA Federal Facility Agreement Manager, and I'd like to have him say a few words if he wishes.
I didn't really have anything planned to say, but I did attend the meeting with Dave Adler and TDEC John Owsley today, going over the budget planning for 2016, and I think that's on the agenda for this evening. And I think in general, we're all in agreement on the priorities that we have over the next few years, K-27 being a high one, and mercury flux reduction out at Y-12 is a high priority. One area of interest is continuing the pace of some of the D&D activity at ETTP, including a new building that is being considered to be accelerated, K-31 building, which was to be decontaminated and reused years ago, but that is now changed. It's going to be demolished, and that will essentially, if funded, speed up the pace for filling up the current landfill and may result in the need to accelerate construction of a new landfill out there that is under review. And what we discussed today at that meeting was making sure that that lower priority K-31 building and the effect that it has on filling up the existing landfill and the cost for a new landfill doesn't turn into shift priorities away from some of the higher risk-based priorities, such as mercury source controls at Y-12. So we'll be keeping an eye on that and making sure that if funding is available to do both, that's great, but we do want to make sure that mercury releases at Y-12 are maintained as a priority.
Thank you, Mr. Crane. TDEC, Mr. Owsley.
First and foremost, I want to apologize to the board for not being in my seat at the beginning of the meeting. I was real close, and I've got a good excuse, but I won't bore you with it. I have no announcements. I will reiterate what you've heard from Dave and Jeff on the budget discussions. We are in agreement on the priorities of the projects that are needed in the near future. However, budgets being what they are, there are going to have to be some give and take from the regulators and the Department of Energy, and from TDEC's perspective, we, as in the past, will be looking for a balanced approach between media cleanup, as Jeff pointed out, the mercury cleanup, and D&D's, and DOE's efforts to demolish facilities on the reservation. But all in all, the DOE's life cycle baseline and priority of projects is in line with the Department of Environment and Conservation's.
Thank you, Mr. Owsley. We'll move on to the public comment period. Ms. Hall, are you prepared to take the duties tonight?
I am prepared.
Well, great, thank you.
Okay, the public comment period is now open. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak? Okay. As a Citizens Advisory Board to the Department of Energy on Environmental Cleanup, we want to encourage the community at large to attend and participate in our board and committee meetings. If you are unable to attend, please send in your questions and comments to the address shown. Appropriate comments and questions will be read during the public comment section of the Site-Specific Advisory Board and will be given the same consideration by the board and DOE as those given in person. Meeting schedules and ways to communicate with the board can be obtained by calling 241-4583 or by visiting our website.
Thank you very much. Very well done. We'll move on to the presentation, which tonight will be the fiscal year 2016 Oak Ridge Environmental Management Budget and Prioritization, presented by Ms. Tammy Blaine. Tammy has spent 24 years in the DOE's Planning and Budget Division, where she's the team leader of Science, Research, and Environmental Management team. Over the years, Ms. Blaine has held budget responsibilities for most every program on the Oak Ridge Reservation, but has spent the majority of her career supporting the EM budget system. Ms. Blaine is currently performing a 2-month detail to the Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management, while the Director of Planning and Baseline Management Division, Alan Stokes, is on a detail to headquarters. So, Ms. Blaine, we look forward to your presentation.
Okay, we want to start off the presentation this evening talking a bit about the budget process. And I want to explain to you that at any given time, we are working on 3 fiscal year budgets at once. For example, this fiscal year is 14. We just recently in January got our final appropriation and received the guidance from headquarters basically telling us what we had to spend. In 15, we saw, as Mark mentioned, a very high level release of the President's budget last Tuesday, bottom line numbers for the site, and we are anxiously awaiting more detail on 15 that we can share. And then on 16, we are starting to develop our budget formulation, going through our budget formulation process to develop that 16 budget. So I want to walk you through what that 16 budget cycle is, because again, it spans numerous years. So we're starting right now with the meetings to collaborate on priorities and milestones. We'll be taking input from TDEC EPA as well as the SSAB to formulate that budget. We're probably about the April-May timeframe. We will be submitting that budget to headquarters, and at that stage it does become embargoed, meaning we can't share any details after that time outside the federal government. The budget will go up to headquarters, and during the summer months they will look at it, they will review it, we will have many questions and answer sessions, there'll be changes, and in about the August timeframe or so, that budget will go to the CFO's office for review and then up through the secretary. And again, all through that process, there will be discussions, changes, tweaks to that budget. But then finally, in early September, that budget will be submitted to OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, for their consideration. In a typical year, we would see in about late November, early December, a pass-back from OMB, which basically tells the department, here's what we think about this budget. It may give us some challenges that we have to go back and scrub and figure out how we're going to rearrange or cut. There may be increases in some cases to programs that OMB feels is a priority. This year, that was very much delayed, that OMB pass back. And so that's one reason why we're so late in the President's budget receipt and also the formulation of 16. But once we get that OMB pass back information and all of the input is fed back in, then in February, normally, the President's budget is released to Congress. During the spring months, Congress then will be reviewing that 16 budget. They'll be having hearings and meetings to look at that, and we should see both the House and Senate mark of that 16 budget to say basically what the House and Senate would fund or what they would recommend out of that 16 request. Then, oftentimes there is a conference required in late summer to come together, for the House and Senate to come together and basically compromise on that budget so that by October 1st, we would have an appropriation. Now, out of those 24 years that I've been in budget, I think I might have seen that happen twice. As we know, it typically doesn't happen, and we're under continuing resolution after continuing resolution, and it's sometime up until the first quarter, sometimes first of the second, before we see a budget. But that's the way the typical process should work. Okay, and so again, we're here tonight talking about this 16 budget that we're preparing at this time. So let's start talking in a little bit more detail about fiscal year 14. You can see our President's budget request to Congress was $413 million, but the appropriation that we actually received was $430 million. And that is due to congressional plus-ups of $17 million that we received this year. And we'll talk more about specifically where those plus-ups are on the next slide. But we also just wanted to point out that our Recovery Act program is wrapping up. All field work has been completed now. There's some paperwork still to be done, but the balance of that work, including paperwork, has been turned in. The EM program did a fabulous job executing that work. A lot of great progress was made and spent, as you can see, almost all the money. And by the time all the final costs are in, that likely will be very close to zero. And if you recall, under Recovery Act, you needed to spend the money or it sent back to Treasury. So they did a fabulous job really trying to spend everything they could to make sure good progress was made in Oak Ridge. Okay, so we break it down now a little further for you, and we put 13 up as well for a reference. You can see that 430 number in 14 is a pretty good bump from 13. As I mentioned, our President's budget request was $413, which was a $10 million increase in our request over what we received in 13. And then also the $17 million congressional plus-ups helped tremendously. And that was spread $10 million to the U-233 disposition project, about $2.5 million to the waste disposition line, and $4.5 million to the ORNL Y12 S&M line. And that money was specifically targeted for the outfall line item project. In fact, it was line item money that we received. So that got us a healthy $430 million budget in 14, which is a good thing because just last Tuesday we learned that our FY15 bottom line is $385. Again, we do not have the details to share with you right now about how that $385 is split. OMB is still approving those budget volumes, and as they are approved, they will be released, as Mark said, hopefully later this week. We had hoped to see the detail last Friday, and we didn't get it. So we're anticipating that just any day now. Okay, so our principles, guiding principles for project prioritization. Protecting human health and the environment is number one. Eliminating significant health and environmental threats, ensuring worker safety, minimizing off-site contamination, right there at the top of the list. But then also complying with with regulatory requirements, CERCLA, FFA, RCRA, all the different requirements are second on our list. Then also supporting the ongoing DOE missions on the Oak Ridge Reservation. We're very unique in Oak Ridge in that we have a very active EM program as well as a thriving science mission and NNSA as well. And we all have to work together to make sure that we support Oak Ridge in the best way possible. And then also, we are concerned with supporting local and state economies, sequencing work to minimize impacts to the workforce. We try to do everything we can to be smart in our planning so that we don't have big drop-offs and spikes in the workforce. We try to levelize that as best we can. So I think, as David mentioned, our priorities really are the same this year as they have been in the past. In the near term, in the 14 through 16 time frame, at ETTP, it's demolishing K-25, and that's been accomplished. And as they mentioned, the last truckload of waste was hauled off yesterday, preparing K-27 for demolition, continuing the U-233 direct disposition campaign, as well as processing and dispositioning the true waste inventories. And then finally, planning for our 3 large line item projects, the Mercury Outfall 200 project, the True Sludge project, as well as that EMDF disposal cell. In the midterm, we look to complete the U-233 processing and disposition, complete the true waste processing and disposition, as well as the closure of ETTP. We then plan to construct and operate our line item projects that we are just starting on right now. And then in the long term, the focus will be the balance of OR&L and Y-12 cleanup. So, path forward from where we are today. Evaluate the 15 President's budget. Once we have those details, we'll be able to share them and we'll see what the impacts are to the program. We are planning to conduct a public workshop on the budget this year, as we have in past years. I don't think those plans are firm yet, but we're working on that. We will receive the recommendation from the SSAB on our 16 budget, and we'll evaluate the input that we receive from the SSAB, as well as TDEC and EPA. And then finally, we will be submitting a 16 budget request to headquarters. We haven't received the guidance yet, even asking for that. We've been so wrapped around 15, I believe, that 16 has been pushed out. But we do expect that soon, and I was asked to guess this morning, probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks, we'll be turning around a budget for 16, if I had to guess. So to wrap it up, we'll put a real busy chart up here for you to look at. And basically, this takes all of our priorities and tries to lay them out over the years. You see the budget profile on the side. And in a perfect world, if we had all the money we needed, you know, up here in this range, we could get a lot of work done very quickly. Reality, we'll have to look at those budget targets as they come in and figure out how best to get all of this work done. But in the near term, you'll see our K-25, our True Waste, our U-233, our EMDF planning going on, as well as our base operations cost. One point I want to make is, if you notice this dip, when we finally do get ETTP cleaned up, there's about $50 to $70 million of base operations costs there that will drop off, that we can hopefully then factor back into the rest of this work and begin to bring in then the Mercury facilities, OR&L and Y-12 balance of reservation. And I know Dave mentioned that this chart is something that can be talked about more, dug into a little deeper at next week's committee meeting, but we just wanted to put it out there to give you an idea of what all of this work looks like and the timeline and the funding that we need to complete it. So are there questions?
Yeah, could you go into you made a statement, or maybe go back, you said balance the budget between X10 and Y12. What does that mean?
Well, if I said that, I don't
there
know.
was a bullet, if you want to go back one
Sure.
slide maybe. Maybe one more. Balance of the last one, balance of Y12.
Okay, the balance of the cleanup that's remaining at Y12 and OR&L. A good bit of that work was done under Recovery Act. We took care of some high priority work there, but there's still a lot of cleanup work at Y12 and
Okay.
ORNL.
All right, so it's the balance of the work,
Right.
not balancing.
Right, the balance of the work that remains. And again, on the mountain chart, that's what you see, the bow wave
Gotcha.
at the end.
It was just the words.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask a question, make a comment? Please use the microphone, Ms. Your way. State your name, please, for the record.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Susan Gowerecki. I'm just questioning that budget you have on the wall there. Have you done any more realistic projections, considering that we've not been able to sustain budgets approaching $500 million for the last several years? Where would we really end up as far as cleanup if you're looking at $400 to $450 million flat budgeting for the next foreseeable future?
Well, we're starting that process because the 15 target of 385, is a bit hard to swallow. And so we're looking at that now. We're going to start that process immediately and start talking about what our priorities would be. Again, that's where the input from the board as well as EPA and TDEC is important to help us make those hard decisions on exactly how that budget will impact this work that will be done and what the priorities are. Anything, Dave or Mark, that you want to add to that?
One thing about this slide, much of the uptick in the annual budget is actually not explained by us assuming we get more real spending power. It's actually explained by escalation. So roughly, I'd say most of the uptick in the out years is based upon us assuming that we sustain a certain spending power, but we inflate the dollars. We escalate the dollars so as to preserve that spending power. I can't remember what escalation rate we use. I think it's 2 something.
420 flat until 18, and
Right.
2% from 18 on out, 2% escalation.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, realistically, what is Oak Ridge EM's office doing to raise the site's priority at headquarters? Because we fail when it comes to the competition with Savannah Riverside and Hanford and,
Yeah.
those programs which get so much more for EM than we do.
I'll let Mark add in if he sees fit, but the answer we've always given to that question is to execute work well. The best thing we can do is to get jobs done safely and within schedule and budget commitments we've made. So it's delivery of work. And getting that done requires that we have a consensus on priorities and a plan for getting work done. That's always been the best thing. We're not supposed
It's not working.
to. Well, it went up a little bit, but the entire federal sector is under the same pressures that we're under. There are school systems and fire departments, all types of government activities that are under pressure right now. But that's been the best answer. I have to be careful that we don't say anything to suggest or promote you guys as some type of lobbying organization. That would be totally inappropriate.
I'm not part
Right.
of these guys. I can lobby if I want.
Anybody, yeah. We take the numbers. We always ask for healthy amounts. We're allowed to ask for what's called above target spending rates. So we make sure headquarters knows what we can do if we get more money. But at the end of the day, the president and OMB tell us what we're going to get, and then we do our best to make sure that they get a good value for that so they keep it coming.
But really, David, you haven't answered my question, which was what you're doing to change the priorities at headquarters. And that's that list that puts D&D so far down at the bottom. And part of the problem here is we can't get to our soils and groundwater in large part until a lot of that D&D is done. And yet I don't think Oak Ridge has done a very good job of selling that concept to headquarters, along with the risks that this site poses to the greater community surrounding and downstream.
So just quickly address it. My perspective on this is, first, if you take a look at the 13 appropriation versus what we were appropriating 14, I suspect that from the 403 level to 430, which is 27 million for us, I suspect that is probably the highest, one of the highest, if not the highest, increases across the complex. Now, the FY15 number, 385, while it's disappointing, we're going to have to work with that for 15. We'll see what the appropriation ultimately is. We will take advantage of the FY14 plus up that we received to help us in 15. But as Dave mentioned, the things that we emphasize when we go to Washington with our headquarters colleagues, when we accompany them to the Hill to talk to folks on the Hill, when we talk to our own representatives here, are the success that we're having on our projects. That's important. We emphasize the fact that Oak Ridge is a unique site. I mean, across the complex, the fact that we're in Oak Ridge, the DOE reservation is in Oak Ridge, the town of Oak Ridge, that there is such a large population that works or lives very close in proximity to the work that we do. We emphasize those things, but I'm not going to say that the problems that other sites are facing are any less important, and we do try to be corporate about it. I live in Oak Ridge, and I want I want a $500 million funding level every year. In this budget environment, that's simply not going to happen. So I do want you to know that I spend a lot of time, probably most of my time is working on trying to advance budget for the priorities that we have, that we share with the regulators and we share with you all here and with the community. I'm hopeful that FY15 is an anomaly, at least in the President's request. The overall EM budget, as you probably saw when the release came out, is also down from the FY14 appropriation. It was a mixed bag as far as sites. Paducah was down 16% from the FY14 appropriation. Hanford, Richland operations was down 10%, but some sites were up. River protection was up 2%. Savannah River is up 2%, and so every year it's a little different. But I do think we have folks in place right now at headquarters, and definitely our representatives that feel strongly in the work that we're doing and support it, and we'll keep working those issues with them.
Okay.
Mr. Bell?
I think the reason for DOE not being on the high priority is because of the difference.
Jimmy, would you please use the microphone? Thank you.
A reason that Oak Ridge may not be on the same priority level as some of us would like is because the waste that we have here compared to, say, Savannah River or Hanford is so much lower on the radioactive scale, because those places dealt with the plutonium recovery from spent fuel, and all of that waste is just phenomenal with respect to comparison to what we deal with here at Oak Ridge. If I were God looking at the overall situation, I might too put priorities on getting rid of those higher levels of waste at those two sites. But on your comment about the FY35 number, FY 385 for 15, if you look at the proposal to attack the problems at Y12 with respect to the 31 building at the K21, K25 site, would you think in terms of dropping off that 31 building to favor the removal of the material from the Y12 plant?
I'll address that one if you don't mind, sir. And really, to Jeff Crane's point about our sequencing of the work out at ETTP, and I'm glad that the folks, Dave and others, met with Jeff and with John and others today to go over our 16 priorities. I feel like if we can afford to do it, sequencing K-31 between 25 and 27 will exactly allow us to do what Jeff, emphasizes, which is, place priority and spend the money on things that they have as a priority because of our timeline and our schedule for Outfall 200 Mercury Treatment Facility. By putting K-31 between 25 and 27, we can potentially accelerate that schedule of ETTP and finish that job much sooner. And that will allow us, when we start, get the Mercury Treatment Facility up and operating in 19, and start taking the taking the buildings down at Y12 Mercury Process Buildings in the early 2020s. Hopefully we're done with ETTP and we can focus those funds there when we actually are ready to do it. Right now we're working through the process, both the regulatory process and our DOE approval process to get the approvals we need to proceed with the construction of the Mercury Treatment Facility. So I think the timing could be perfect to do exactly what you said and also achieve what Jeff Crane had mentioned earlier in the meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Hall.
Yeah, I'm actually just curious. On your graph, if you said it was a projected escalation of the budget, I was just wondering why there's a spike around year 34. Is there any particular reason, or is that just how it's projected?
I think the
artist's
scale is
conception.
off a little bit. I think you'll see that the last 2 years, 42 and 46, kind of got pushed over down a line. So if you kind of move over a little bit, that is probably closer to 38 or 40, and I believe that is a result of escalation. 2% from 18 to 42, and just the timing of our work. I don't know if there's any other reason for that.
It's not purely escalation.
Yeah.
If it was, you'd expect a straight line. Projects come in chunks, if you will.
So is that just a time that you're expecting there to be some big
Right.
project going on?
There's something there. It's probably tearing down some big facility
Okay.
that causes the cost that it appears or nil
Yeah.
to have a high spike there.
Thank you. I do have one question. It's more geared, not so much to you, Ms. Price, but towards the end of the table. With the ongoing condition at the waste isolation pilot project, how is that going to affect our D&D and our waste removals?
It's a good question.
Could you repeat it for my sake?
Yes.
Do it again.
WIP has had some problems, and we ship a lot of stuff there. I'm wondering how that's going to affect our disposal of waste from the Oak Ridge site, in English.
Very good question, and actually, I had a VTC with Commissioner Martineau today to talk to him about this and kind of tell him what we know at this point. If you're not familiar, on February the 5th, there was a fire in the waste isolation pilot plant where the department sends all of its transuranic waste. On February 14th, there was a separate incident unrelated where there was a radiation release. This happened at 11:30 on a Friday evening. There were no workers down in the salt mine. It's a salt mine 2,000 feet below ground where they bury the transuranic waste, or place the transuranic waste. There was nobody working at the time. Nobody has entered that facility since February 14th. The cams, the continuous air monitors went off at 11:30 that evening on the 14th, signifying that there was some contamination above normal levels. The exhaust immediately filtered through a HEPA filter anytime the cam goes off to prevent airborne contamination outside of the mine. There were some folks, there was some elevated readings above background but below regulatory levels above ground, and there were 13 workers that received some dose. low-level dose. It doesn't appear to present any kind of health risk to those individuals, but they did receive a dose. So since that time, the department has put together 2 accident investigation teams. We actually have a couple folks from Oak Ridge supporting WIP there right now. 1 accident investigation team for the fire and 1 for the radiation release. They have, the second team has prepared, working with DOE headquarters, a reentry plan. And my understanding is, as of today, that they anticipate re-entering in the near future, probably within the next week, if not by the end of this week, to understand what may have happened. Now, they have put instrumentation down below ground just within the last week or so, and I'm told that it did not detect levels above what would normally be found in the mine under normal operations. So they feel like they can re-enter the mine to determine what exactly happened, because at this point we don't know. Now the problem for us is, as you all know, we're planning to reinitiate our shipments of transuranic waste to WIP this month, in fact. And right now, WIP is, of course, not receiving any waste from anywhere across the complex. And so there could be impacts depending on what they find when they re-enter. And like I said, I'm hoping within the next week or so we'll have a better idea of what happened and what that means for WIP, when the outage will end and when they'll start taking waste again. We do, of course, have regulatory milestones that are important to us to meet, and that's what we wanted to make sure we taught, STP milestones that we want to talk to the Commissioner about today and explain where we are. Unfortunately, we don't know a lot, but that is what we know at this point. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Whitney. Go ahead, Jimmy.
From the information that I gathered from the paper and so forth, I couldn't tell what the fire was. It's kind of hard to understand what flammable material would be down in there that was not contained some way. And the other question was, I couldn't get an idea of whether it was in the remote or the contact handled areas, or does it shut both of them down, or can you talk about that?
Yes, I can tell you what I know, and I know about the fire, which of course is a separate incident, and that was a truck fire, and it was something in the engine. It wasn't related to the waste in the mine.
It was above ground.
It was a vehicle fire, yes, sir. As far as the actual radiation release, we don't have any details right now. They haven't re-entered the facility, and hopefully when they do and investigate, we'll quickly learn the details and that it's hopefully not bad, so we can begin, operations and start shipping waste out there soon.
Any last questions?
Just one
Ms. Cook?
additional question. Do we have storage capacity here such that treatment of our TRU would go ahead and continue and we just simply put it in storage?
We're looking at options right now. It's ultimately, if there's a long outage, and I don't know that there will be, storage on site may be an option for the CH. We're not sure about the remote handled, but there may be options there as well. It's obviously not, from an efficiency standpoint, not what we want to do, because we're spending a lot more money than necessary to process, certify, and ship the waste off-site. And so that'll be a discussion, if we do end up in a long-term outage, that we'll have to have with the state and see if that is something that they find to be of value to store on-site at the extra cost to meet the milestones, or if there may be a way to pursue another option. So we are looking at those right now, hoping that we don't have to employ any of those options, but we are looking at those, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Blaine, thank you very much. Very entertaining presentation, and it morphed into a very good discussion. Even though it wasn't in your bailiwick, it did bring up some good questions. So thank you very much.
The U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.